I am 27. I have spina bifida. I DJ for a living. Well, I DJ as a passion because I just love DJing. I DJ. I'm an artist as well. I am affiliated in Selection, which is a DJ collective of, well, it's not just a DJ collective. It's a collective of DJs, producers, artists. Um, the list goes on. It's also a radio show. It's also its own festival and show. It's also a tour.
You mentioned that you have spina bifida. Can you share a little bit about what that is?
Spina bifida is a birth defect in which your spine doesn't completely close within the womb, um, depending on um, depending on the level of severity. So it can either be um, an upper closure of the spine or a lower closure, and depending on where that closure is, that also determines the severity of your disability. So, for example, if your spine doesn't close in the upper part of your spine, um, that doesn't necessarily guarantee you won't be able to walk. That doesn't completely, you know, um, deem you into a wheelchair. So, for me, I had the lower closure, the lower opening of the spine. So the surgery itself is what kind of caused my disability. I've been in a wheelchair all my life. It's never really been a thing for me. Not to say that things were always accessible to me, as this was pretty much a learning process for me and my entire family. I was always kind of told that, like, oh, you can do it, like you can figure it out, you can do this, we can help you figure it out. Like, let's just, it was always pushed. My independence was always pushed. Whether, it had to be crawling around and getting out of my chair to get to something or climbing something, as much as it freaked out my mom and like my grandparents, to this day it still does. I was always willing to just kind of push that limit just to see how far I can go and how, like, what I can do, just to see what my limitations were.
What are your thoughts about inclusion in the music industry?
Inclusion for me means everyone, disabled to able-bodied, however you identify, you're included and you're represented. I asked you, to introduce me as a Black female DJ and artist because those are the things that I represent. Being Black, being a Black woman, being disabled, those are those things that I represent. Not only does representation matter, but so does being present matter when it comes to inclusion. There are some spaces that say they're inclusive, but with inclusion comes comfortability and safety. If a space can provide that safety and that comfortability, then that's real inclusion. For example, like I have like my friends, a lot of my friends are non-binary, a lot of my friends are trans. If they don't feel safe within a space that's supposed to be inclusive, then that's not inclusion. I think we need to include more safe spaces. A festival or show is a little overwhelming. Security and protection is important. Maybe if we have people more on alert of things happening and just pretty much really monitoring people, I think is if we feel protected, we'll really feel included. I think as long as people are protected, especially.
It's interesting that you mentioned the safe space in thinking about expanding on our ideas. One of our
Mhm.
thoughts was to actually create a sensory zone or an inclusion zone
That's
that
perfect. Yeah.
anybody could go to take a break if they needed to. And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be, somebody who's having sensory overload. Somebody might be having a mental health challenge, or they, like you said, might not feel safe because of something that was said or a conversation that took place. But to be able to have that quiet space to retreat to seems like
Exactly.
it's a really important thing for people.
Exactly. Someone to speak to within those spaces that, people can go to and say, hey, look, this person that I overheard this conversation. something was said about me this, in this way. I didn't really like that. And like, someone who can just listen and understand and can relate. Relatability is really important. Speaking to someone who, can relate on maybe a multitude of levels is really important. For example, therapy. Speaking to somebody who may be disabled can relate to me more than another therapist that can, that may be able-bodied. Those make two different kinds of impacts on me. And just kind of creating a welcoming environment. For example, when I first went to a selection show, the actual fan base and pretty much culture itself is extremely welcoming. Nothing like I've ever like experienced, because when I went to a lot of other shows, I've always felt like a little uncomfortable, a little, out of place. But when I first went to those shows, it's a warm environment. If we can create that with the people experiencing that, from able-bodied to disabled to non-binary to trans to BIPOC, that's really important as well. When I first went to those shows, the culture was like, do what you love. These shows are all about love, everybody enjoying and having a great experience with each other. This is about unity. This is about all these things. Pretty much the rules were kind of set before you came in there. Same with Afropunk. I've had that experience with Afropunk. Like, the rules are already set. So when you get to Afropunk and you go in that festival, it's nothing but love. You know what I mean? And I think if you have those rules set, you can create an environment where, if you know those rules, then all you have no choice but to just share love and just share that experience with each other in a positive way.
As you were talking and sharing these great ideas, I was just thinking, as I've having a few of these conversations for Inclusion Festival Online, it seems like as the music and industry takes this time to pause, that it's really a powerful opportunity to reflect, and also that we can continue to have these conversations and co-create this new normal as we move forward with regards to the music industry, and keep these ideas flowing and going, and being sure that people feel really safe and comfortable, included.
Yeah, exactly. I do feel like there definitely needs to be more BIPOC and disabled people in the industry, making rules, creating programs. For me, when it comes to the disabled BIPOC community, I definitely feel as though we need more representation. And not only do we need representation, we need more speaking power to create these kinds of things and these kinds of rules, create these kinds of spaces for not just each other but everyone. There isn't enough of us. Outside of myself, I probably only know one physically disabled person in the music industry, and he's an artist. And like, that's as far as it goes with me. His name is Ethereal, really, really talented artist from Atlanta. And I believe he has spina bifida like myself. Yeah, that's as far as it goes. I don't see anybody that looks like me who's, an executive in the industry or so I definitely feel like we need to open up that door for a
Absolutely.
lot of us. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking this time to have this conversation, and I hope that
Thank you.
it's helpful for people, just to hear
Yeah.
your perspective
Yeah.
on some of these things. It's a very unique perspective within the industry, especially. So
Yeah.
hopefully we
Yeah.
move towards it being more normalized, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has to be normalized. There's so many things that needs to be normalized now, and we have so much time now to speak on it and create a normalized conversation. And with the normalized conversation becomes a normalized perspective. And then once that perspective becomes normalized, change becomes obvious and necessary then.
You just gave me goosebumps when you said
Ah,
so thank you for
thank you.
taking the time and having the conversation. That's really
Thank
important. I really
you.
appreciate it very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. So.